This week, what the hell do Bridget Jones and Winston Churchill have to do with each other, but also climate change? But first, I'm Quinn Emmett, and this is Important, Not Important Science for People Who Give a Shit. You can hit subscribe right now to get this essay and my conversations with the world's smartest people every single week. You can also find the email or website version and links to everything at importantnotimportant.com or right in your show notes. And now, to answer today's big question, or try to at least. Here is a non-exhaustive list of things that Bridget Jones and Winston Churchill have in common, I think. 1. Thoughtful but fairly eccentric moms. 2. Bosses who at least seemed to loathe them, at least at first. 3. Famous underwear. 4. Boldly sharing their commitments with the world. 5. Publicly failing at many of those commitments. 6. Drinking. 7. Sequels not quite as good as the original. And last, coming through when it fucking counted. In this essay, I will argue that Bridget Jones is the perfect climate era hero, because she is all of us. On the one hand, Bridget Jones narrates her life out loud as the perfect 2024 old millennial doomer, hyper-aware, full of self-loathing, unfounded confidence and brutal cynicism, everywhere drowning in ice cream and her equivalent of doom scrolling. She is resolutely dedicated to self-improvement, and she breaks every commitment she makes to herself. Raise your hand if that's you. She loves her job. She fucking hates her job. She also fucking hates her boss, who, 1, is awful, and 2, wants to sleep with her, which she is, 3, not adverse to, despite a slalom course of red flags. Bridget Jones once diarized, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that when one part of your life starts going okay, another falls spectacularly to pieces." And she's not wrong, right? And if there's a better metaphor for the climate transition, I would like to hear it. But on the other hand, when it counts, when everything is on the line, in the horrific moments after a smoldering Darcy reads her diary and leaves, Bridget Jones embodies hope in a way we could all learn something from. Not hope in a feely-feely kind of way, but in a, I have exactly one last chance to chase Darcy down right now, and it's going to have to be in my jumper and underwear kind of hope. That kind of hope. Hope in the very practical way Men Explain Things to Me and Hope in the Dark author Rebecca Solnit, and yes, Winston Churchill, agree is the only way through life's challenges, through sea level rise or the Blitz, by realizing in that last moment that it's not too late, and then fucking doing something about it. As Rebecca Solnit said, hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. To hope is to give yourself to the future, and that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. Again, that's Rebecca Solnit. So what Bridget and Winston realized in their last pivotal moment of hope is that the only way out is through. That ignoring that incessant little flame of hope inside their fucking ribs would, surprisingly but assuredly, go against everything they'd recently learned about themselves and about this world. That it couldn't be ignored. It had to be acted upon. Right the fuck now. Love, relationships, people, jobs, society, war. These things are all imperfect and fortunately and unfortunately inextricable from who we are, each of us, and certainly together. Not unlike personal and or systemic climate or public health actions. It's really easy to shit on things that are imperfect, right? Like one-way mask wearing or trying to recycle fucking anything. Riding a bike to work when the bike lane is an old stripe of paint running down the side of a busy road. Or if you want to be a total dick, someone driving a hybrid, or even paying off a stranger's medical debt because it's not going to fix the system. Yeah, sure, those actions are all drops in the proverbial fucking hot ocean of shit we have to solve. But you have to start somewhere. We all have to start somewhere. You have to try to cook soup and have it come out blue. As documented so vividly in The Splendid in the Vial, and I'm going to quote it a lot here, you have to constantly text FDR for money and destroyers like Winston did and get absolutely nothing in return. You have to go through hell to feel that tiny last prick of hope nearly dashed and still fucking do something with it. You have to let go of all of your bullshit and open yourself up emotionally to the possibility that this action will change nothing, but that doing it every day, and especially this day, will not only change you, but maybe do something. Committing to action, maybe immediately after a painfully honest conversation or inner monologue on the screen about where we are and why, it's how we get through all of this, to the other side. When you subscribe to our newsletter and our essays and all that stuff, you get an automated email that asks you to reply and tell us why you're here. So I need you people to understand a couple things here. One, I read every single one of your responses. And two, I'm a crier, a fucking crier. But my big secret, well, I mean, not anymore, I guess, is that I genuinely don't care why you give a shit, why you're here. Just that you've shown up and you're ready to be pointed in the right direction. Your game or your voting history might not be pretty, but if your attitude is, put me in, coach, I will play you over any one of these other talented no-shows every time. As I have tried to teach and show my kids, showing up is most of it. Showing up is just what we do for our friends, for the planet, and for the people who have drastically less than we do because some motherfuckers made it that way and continue to stick to it. The correct answer, speaking of movies, to I need your help, I can't tell you what it is, you can never ask me about it, and we're going to hurt some people, is always, whose car are we going to take? I don't care if you're here because you lost someone to COVID. I mean, I do, you get it. Or if you've got lead in your water, or you're a teacher who can't afford school supplies, or you manage a multi-billion-dollar college endowment. If you're here, I automatically assume it's because you want to take that infuriating little flame of fucking hope still burning in your chest or your esophagus or whatever and turn it into something real. You might be here to answer the question, what can I do? My job is to not only give you the answers to that question, but to challenge you back. What will you do? What will you do? I like this quote from Marcella Mulholland. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. That's what Bridget did. What will you do? Will you run down the street in your knickers? Will you run through New York City to get to a New Year's Eve party to profess your love to Sally before midnight? Are you, I think, like 10, and will you tear through airport security on Christmas to say goodbye to Joanna, who I think came back like a week later? Will you crash Elaine's wedding and then ride in the back of a bus together as the music plays, slowly coming to terms with what you've done? Will you knock on doors for school board candidates who aren't racist fascists? Will you show up at public utility commission meetings? Will you sign up for clinical trials? Will you splurge for those teacher supplies even when your kid doesn't go to school there anymore? Will you move your investments to a fossil fuel-free 401k? Fun fact, you can do most of that shit from your knickers. Bridget did Winston did, knickers at best. And if they can, so can you. Now look, I can't think of a single action or person or group we recommend that's objectively perfect. And that's mostly because, perfection is one, stupid, and two, impossible. Because there's trade-offs to everything and everyone. Here's a personal one. For example, my children will never be late to swim practice or ballet or math or whatever. Not on my fucking watch. But I'm also self-aware enough to know it was on the calendar. Dictator bona fides shine through more often than they should. So I'm working on it, but I'm never going to get there entirely. And you know this already, but let's just say it out loud. Your amazing plan that you've told everybody about to walk to work from now on, it's not going to keep the jet stream from slowing down. Sorry. But it will, sure as shit, help you feel better and maybe make some other people around you think about, well, fuck, can I walk to work? How far is my work? And is parking actually as much of a pain in the ass as it is, isn't it? We spend 75-ish years bouncing around in our vulnerable little meat sacks, trying not to die and or accidentally procreate before we want to or are supposed to, whatever. Only sometimes do we actually get the chance to affect the world back. Metaphorically, at least, punching back against the tides of circumstance that keep crashing against your increasingly exposed shoreline. Literally punching the waves, which is something I've 100% done with zero irony, intentional irony at least, will solve absolutely nothing about global heating or sea level rise. But if this otherwise harmless practice exhausts you enough to sleep better at night, to wake up refreshed to fight another day, then fucking punch away, Rocky. And then come on back when you're ready for actions that are going to move the needle. I love every action we endorse and every shit giver like you in our community because any one of you doing any one of these things counts. Full stop. But should you celebrate picking up your own knob-free induction stove from Best Buy? Of course. Your house is suddenly far less poisonous than it was. Should you stop there? Obviously not. You should obviously also yell at your city council to subsidize induction stoves for low-income households. I can promise you, as someone that has a gummy every night, that this sort of local participation is the ultimate high. Compound action like that is how we get better. Not perfect, better. Winston didn't win the war himself, but he did keep telling everyone that we could win. He put himself on record. Winston, Bridget, the rest of us, we're wildly imperfect. Old Winnie was what the world needed in 1940, but nowhere near perfect as a prime minister before, during, and especially after the war. You can read any of the 11 billion biographies on the man to get a taste. But he was only extremely reluctantly offered the top job in 1940 because Belgium was toast and France was unexpectedly going down hard and fast. The UK was obviously next, and Chamberlain was an appeaser. So, if Bridget Jones knew herself like none of the rest of us will ever admit to. Remember, she talked about the smoking, the drinking, the vulgar mother, the verbal diarrhea. Well, Winston did too. He was as self-aware about his drinking and bathing rituals and shit as Bridget. And he was as self-aware about that as his place in time and history. Shit was going sideways in both of their worlds. And fast. No matter who you are, it feels like the end of the world when that's happening. So you flail. You do what you can. Churchill wasn't the only one keenly aware of how quickly everything was going to shit in 1940. However much new leaders were needed, his was obviously a very specific case. One mass observation diarist, which was the thing they did, wrote, "If I had to spend my whole life with a man, I'd choose Chamberlain. But I think I would sooner have Mr. Churchill if there was a storm and I was shipwrecked." And obviously, 1940 was one hell of a storm. Look, in his first few days as Prime Minister, Churchill basked in this kind of public support, often literally publicly, intentionally, not only as a master orator, one to many, but also as a showman taking this in, embodying all this hope and angst and worry and courage. But then he went home and he confessed to his military advisor and confidant, again from The Splendid and the Vile. He said, poor people, they trust me, and I can give them nothing but disaster for quite a long time. Now, believe me when I tell you that some of our action steps, the ones we believe in the most, are in the same boat. Compound action just takes time. Like Bridget Jones, Winnie was not wrong. For as much progress as we'd made in the decades prior to that moment, things were really bad. And part of Winnie's style, like Bridget's, was to admit this to himself and in public, to friends, to everyone, for everyone to hear. But they both always aimed for more, however daunting those odds, however impossibly slow their progress. Here's another quote from Splendid and the Vile. Churchill brought to number 10 Downing Street a naked confidence that under his leadership, Britain would win the war, even though any objective appraisal would have said he did not have a chance. Churchill knew that his challenge now was to make everyone else believe it, too. And again, that's put together by Eric Larson, the wonderful author of Splendid and the Vile and others. Anyways, eventually, like Bridget Jones, FDR and Stalin hit their all is lost cinematic moment, decided to finally forge the war machines and alliances that Winston had spent 2 years fucking begging for. All because the clear and sudden alternative was a world gone fascist, which obviously it didn't stop there. Anyways, Churchill wrote later, after millions of dead, including tens of millions of Russians, the Nazis defeated, he said, I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and this trial. I mean, sure, bud. History written by the victors, you know? The point is the Allies didn't storm Normandy because it was fun. And Bridget didn't actually want to run down that snowy cobblestone street in her underwear. Probably didn't even think about it, what she was wearing. But she fucking had to. They had to storm it. They couldn't ignore the sliding doors moment that was clearly before them. Right? We were learning more and more about what was happening, about the Holocaust. And still a little hope. They couldn't ignore the fucking hope. They couldn't ignore that somehow, some way, there was still, after everything, inexplicably, one last shot. But that it required everything. That only now, having spent the entire movie / war discarding what we wanted for what we needed, and after exposing our truest selves, literally and, philosophically to ourselves and everyone else, this was that moment. One final moment to act. As Winston said, we can only do our best and give the rest of what we have, whatever there may be left to us. Listen, and you can hear Winston's words ringing in Bridget's head as she tears down the snowy street in her long gray sweater. Here's perhaps a more relevant and timely example of hope in the face of grand adversity. Although man's record as a steward of the natural resources of the earth has been a discouraging one, there has long been a certain comfort in the belief that the sea, at least, was inviolate, beyond man's ability to change and to despoil. Rachel Carson wrote in a preface to The Sea Around Us, which won her a National Book Award and spent 86 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list well before the publication of Silent Spring. She wrote, this belief, unfortunately, has proved to be naive. And obviously, we know that now with how much the ocean has heated up, how much sea level rise is already baked in. If you can read that or listen to it, if you can absorb that, if you can stomach it, and still come back the next day, you're fucking hired. Jim Collins said in Good to Great, you must maintain unwavering faith that you can and will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And at the same time, have the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. Man, Winston was all over that shit. That is what was behind his oratory. Again, from The Splendid and the Vile. The speech, I don't remember which one it referenced, he said, set a pattern that he would follow throughout the war, offering a sober appraisal of facts, tempered with reason for optimism. It would be foolish to disguise the gravity of the hour, he said. It would be still more foolish to lose heart and courage. Now look, personally, I walk a tight line doing this work. One, I'm a highly educated and experienced moron. It's a dangerous combination. Two, as I described, I am emotional. I am a crier. Three, I am opinionated. On the fourth hand, I am not a journalist or a doctor or a researcher or policymaker or anything else really of merit. So I too am very much, among all of us, maybe the most wildly imperfect. But try desperately and transparently to only recommend actions that have, at scale, that will truly move the needle, but which are also the most efficient and impactful use of your time and resources. I'm trying to meet you at the intersection of where all this shit is and where you are. And all that means we do a lot of judging here, operating somewhere between, Wirecutter and Consumer Reports. We turn away the vast majority of action steps, candidates, and groups that get sent our way. So is that filtering, curating, or gatekeeping? Yes. On the other hand, I fucking hate gatekeeping. That's part of the reason we exist. Gatekeepers in the climate movement, for example, will react to your very best efforts to join up with something like, Christ, is that blue soup? But real friends, shit givers, they'll say, if you ask me, there isn't enough blue food. Because shit givers don't give a fuck that your food is blue. They care that you fucking showed up, that you tried. Hope embodied is Winston texting an isolationist FDR for the 400th, and for all he knew, final time, give us the tools and we will finish the job. Winston knew the role he was playing in history, however stacked the odds. FDR, at least for a little while longer, up for election for a third time, did not. So he ignored Winston's naked thirst for destroyers and mostly just texted back, the best of luck to you. But Churchill, dictating again from the bath, yet again, had no shame. France was crushed, the UK was isolated, the US was nowhere to be found. What the fuck else was he going to do? All was lost. Darcy was gone. 1.5 degrees Celsius is probably gone. The stakes, the brief window to act one last time, are exactly what made Bridget and the Allies' eventual triumph so fucking rewarding, setting up a much, much, much better future, all things considered. Again, Rebecca Solnit. You can feel absolutely devastated about the situation and not assume this predicts outcome. You can have your feelings and can still chase down facts from reliable sources. And the facts tell us that the general public is not the problem. The fossil fuel industry and other vested interests are. That we have the solutions, that we know what to do, and that the obstacles are political. That when we fight, we sometimes win. And that, and this is my favorite thing she says, we are deciding the future now. Here's a fact. Joe Biden isn't going to live to see the worst of climate change. Neither is Trump. He's also not going to be around when we get to 100% renewables, which we fucking will. But for myriad reasons, including extremely persistent and annoying young progressives, like many of you, he's fighting the fight. You did that. Suffrage, integrated schools and pools and bathrooms, clean water. This shit didn't happen overnight. It's still not right. Things were bleak, though, before they got relatively better. Progress has always come, too, at the expense of people who really don't fucking want it. And sometimes they even say it out loud. Marriage equality didn't happen overnight or without protest. Sam Alito's still trying to roll it back. This isn't finished, but it's better. And we have to celebrate better so we can see what we can do. We can tell other new people, look at what we've done. We got to do more. You have to look at how much a character like Bridget changes over the course of a film to understand that it is only because Bridget Jones came a hell of a long way from hiding under a blanket to blue soup that she could act in that one final moment. You know, it's called a character arc for a reason. The UAW didn't just decide to unionize all the auto workers everywhere this year. Unions are still at their lowest point in a century. But they followed on the heels of some unexpected big wins by the WGA and SAG and UPS, for example. And they beat up legacy automakers who've been treating them like dog shit for fucking decades. Now they're not just hungry, they're confident for so much more. Every little win stacks up. But it's still not great. And you don't strike unless shit is so bad, it's better to not work and not get paid than to continue with the status quo. But here's the thing. You're never alone. Bridget had friends. Winston had friends. You have friends. And if you start or keep putting yourself out there, everybody will know it. It becomes a part of who you are. And it becomes very, very hard to put all that back in the box for yourself, for everyone around you, you've told. So what the fuck do you have to lose? Well, a lot and nothing. As Winston said to Parliament after 1,000 speeches, I'm convinced that every man of you would rise up and tear me down from my place if I for one moment to contemplate parley or surrender. If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground. Remember what legendary film producer Lindsay Duran said. You should check out her TED Talks and everything. The accomplishment the audience values the most is resilience. Look around. The world is more just and healthier than it's ever been. It's not even close. But we're constantly making promises to ourselves and each other and not keeping them. And eventually, Darcy's going to walk right out that door. So again, my job is to ask you, what will you do? That's it for today. If you got feedback, questions, opinions, send them along to questions@importantnotimportant.com. Of course, you can find all of our past conversations and essays in your feed. Enjoy them. And you can hit subscribe to get next ones straight to your feed. So to go deeper, of course, visit importantnotimportant.com. Thanks for being a part of our community. And thank you for giving a shit.